to order at 7:06. We would like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. We'll rise for the pledge. Flag is that way? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, this meeting is open to the public in accordance with Phase 4 guidance issued by the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois State Board of Education. Individuals are required to wear a face covering at all times while in the building, including during the meeting. The capacity of any room is limited to 50 seats and will be spaced a minimum of 6 feet apart. And I think that is all for tonight, and we'll have roll call, please.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
Here.
Mrs. Witt.
Here.
Mrs. Junk and Mr. Carey are absent tonight.
All right, so with 5 members present, we do have a quorum. Would anyone like to move something from consent to new business? Seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
And a second,
Second.
and a roll call.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. All right, are there any board or superintendent salutes?
No, not this evening, but thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to public comment. Do we have any public comments tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of the following action items: approval of accounts payable and payroll August 2020, approval of minutes from the August 5th, 2020 special meeting and the August 10th, 2020 regular meeting, approval of resignations and employment of staff, approval of policies from press second reading, and the following informational items: the new teacher hire report, the summer school and jump start update, and the budget update. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
We'll say Mrs. Witt and Mr. Lawler, your
I'll
second.
second.
All right, and a roll call.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. We'll move on to J1, Kaneland Return to Learn Plan full remote presentation.
Yes, as part of our return to school, one of our data points in planning was to ensure that we had a fully vetted return to learn plan for remote learning, should we have to or when we go that direction. So I just wanted to reiterate and clarify that we do not have a timeline set. We do not have a situation which is going to cause us to go that direction. This is truly forward thinking and future planning for tonight. And so with that, I will, I'm not sure if Mr. Raleigh is going to be first or if Dr. Mumm is going to come first, but I know they're going to tag team and share. And before you start, Mr. Raleigh, I'd just like to take a note to share a word of appreciation to our Ed Services Department, for both of you, along with Laura Garland, for the 5 or 6 or 7 iterations now that have been put together for returning back to school for both AV hybrid, the remote planning, and now this planning for full remote if and when we need to go that direction. So thank you for all of your work, and also the work to the ad team who then reviews this, and our work with the KEA leadership as we regularly meet with them and bounce ideas off of them too as we prepare this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick, and thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Like Dr. Layden said, we wanted to make sure that as we progress through the year, we want to celebrate where we're at right now. We strove, and as we did iteration after iteration, we constantly frame that out in what is best for our learners. How can we safely get them in front of our teachers? And I think there's a celebration to be had over the last week and a half or so. Not to say that there hasn't been some road bumps that we've been able to problem solve collectively as a team, from our administrative teams to our staff to our community. And Kaneland has done a great job of putting our kids in a position to be successful in the environment in which suits them best. So we have about 85% that have been coming for about the last week and a half. About 15% are at home. And both of those groups have had some pretty effective experiences thus far. As we prepare, or as we plan for a full remote learning plan, again, just to emphasize, this is not anything we're anticipating in the near future, but we always wanted to be prepared should that time come. So tonight, we're seeking some feedback. We want to go through this presentation and seeking feedback from the board on any areas that might need further clarification. Our end goal is to put this together in a communication plan and timeline, and we'll go over the timeline a little bit towards the end, but by September 15th, we want to communicate a pretty thorough plan should the need for a full remote situation come about. We're looking to unveil that to the public on September 15th. So collecting your feedback, taking it through to all stakeholders, and then adjusting that plan and finalizing that in the next couple of weeks. How we got here in the background that went into our planning, it dates all the way back to the end of last spring, and as the community and parents and students have experienced what was phase 2 learning, and we'll talk about how that is different than currently what we're doing. They were great about sharing feedback in what went well and where we could adjust. So we took feedback on surveys, we took comments throughout the community from staff, from students. We compiled that with guidelines from the CDC and the Illinois Department of Public Health. And as those were updated, as those were changed, we would need to go back and tweak some of our plans. And when I say some of our plans, when we first started this journey, I think we vetted 19 total plans. And as an administrative team, we went thoroughly through the ins and outs of each one of those, and does it work for our district? And we finalized what currently we are living, what our students are experiencing. But we also know that as COVID-19 progresses and as we get into the fall, into the winter months, there could be a need to go fully remote. So as we prepared for that, we have worked with roughly 15 other school districts, some that are currently full remote, some that are bringing different groups back full time, and we have worked to pick their brains and to help develop the plan that we have in front of us tonight. And lastly, we always wanted to take advantage of an opportunity to continue to improve our instructional practices. So we've spoken with the board, we've spoken with the community through our strategic plan on really focusing on that personalized learning. And if there is a silver lining to any of this, it's that we're starting to see some of those structures where we can personalize for our students, whether they're here in person, whether they're on an application day, whether they are medical or choice remote. And the last piece here is we really looked through the lens of that LDIP continuum of how we continue to provide experiences for our students that go from that legacy-based instruction to more of an individualized and personalized experience. And through all of this, I think we're starting to see more and more of those opportunities where we can start to reach kids at a different level. Using some of those terms, choice remote, medical remote, we wanted to put a slide in here that talked about that key vocabulary, and this to be a common place where people can come back to reference those terms. We use them often, and we wanted to make sure that everyone was clear. So when we would talk about a hybrid model, that is truly the model in which students are going in person on an A day, and then those A students the next day are on an application time, and then those B students are in. So it's flip-flopping, an A and B rotating schedule. We've done that by last name, A through K, L through Z, but that's our hybrid model. And in those, we have in-person days, obviously when they're at the building, and then we have application, and that's the next one. And application days are when students are working at home, self-paced through work that was set up from their teacher on their previous in-person day. We have 2 opportunities for students to work fully remote currently. So we have an opportunity where students chose, a family chose, it was what was best for them. So there is a family choice, fully remote. And there are students that have provided a medical certification, and there is a medical fully remote. And there's some key distinguishing pieces there, but we wanted to differentiate between that as a family choice and a medical exemption. And then lastly, when we discuss fully remote, we'll get into the details of that, but truly a fully remote model is one in which the entire district needs to be, student-wise, learning from home for a variety of different reasons. Looking at the last 5.5 months, we wanted to kind of call some attention to what our learning looked like in the spring to close out the last quarter of the year. what we're currently living in right now, and then what could possibly come in the future. So in the spring, we were under the mandates of the governor. We were looking at, in Illinois, a phase 2 plan. We had some very direct mandates on what we could or couldn't introduce as far as new standards are concerned. A no harm clause that was put into place where students, because of the suddenness of going full remote, because of access inequity with technology, students could not be penalized or penalized if they were not able to access some of those remote materials. As we planned, we looked at instructional time, contact time with teachers, and in our current phase 4 full remote plan, what you see in here, it's much more detailed and much more intensive than what the spring phase 2 was. So students would follow a typical bell schedule for their grade span. So they would be engaged in learning for the school day or the school hours. We'll talk about what those Wednesdays would look like, but on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, students would be following their remote schedule with their teachers. And then Wednesday, we'll get into the details of that, but Wednesday would allow for small groups, because we would still be operating under phase 4. It would allow for some small groups to come on site. And in the full detailed plan, we have gone through and looked at different courses that might need to come on. So when we look at specialized courses, courses that need access to specialized equipment, automotive classes, welding classes, for graphics, if the Chromebooks that students have don't support certain software programs, they can come on site into small groups and have access through those means on Wednesday. And we have a plan on what transportation would look like, how to sign up for those. So that is what our projected phase 4 plan would look like. And then we also have what could possibly come as a phase 2 later in the fall or later in the winter. And a lot of that is going to be out of our control. It's going to be mandated from the governor. We would anticipate, should we get to that again, not planning, not saying it's going to happen at a certain time, but if we get there, it would be pushed down from the governor, and we would anticipate possibly some changes in the school hours. Last year, we were limited in that. It could possibly be a do no harm clause again. We don't know what could come from that. So phase 2, if that comes, would look a little bit different than what we're sharing tonight. When that could happen again, it could come for a variety of different reasons. If the state recommends, based on increased numbers, that even though we're still in a phase 4, that possibly schools might need to scale back a little bit. If our numbers are showing a select group that needs to quarantine for a set amount of time, if it happened to affect a department or a grade level. The thing to note here is those last 2 bullet points. This plan, in the way, and we'll go into the details of how it's set up, this plan is meant to be fluid. Our hope and our intent is to keep kids in front of students as long as we can and as often as we can. Should there be a need to go to a fully remote plan, as soon as that need is lifted and as soon as it is safe, we want to make sure that we're bringing our learners back into the models and the structures in which they were previously learning. So this could be put into place for grade span, so it might go into effect for the elementaries, or if there was a larger population at the middle school or high school, we could have that particular grade span go full remote while the others are operating as they typically are right now. It could be used for a week, it could be used for 2 weeks or a month, but as soon as we can come back safely, we want to make sure that we're bringing our students back on site. And then looking at what some of those transitions would look like. So the transition in our delivery of instruction is going to happen for all of our hybrid learners. So those that are currently coming in a 10-day span, they're coming 5 days for in-person instruction. They are all going to transition, and all of those students would be learning from home. So there is a delivery transition in which we would need to do a little bit of planning and what exactly that looks like, but all of our hybrid students would transition to learning remotely from home. And then we have content transition and teacher transition, and this gets a little bit more tricky as we go through. And this truly is going to be at administrative discretion on a case-by-case basis. As we progress through and it gets later and later into the year, the ability to do this at different grade spans becomes pretty difficult. We truly need to look at what the students have been learning and how that pacing lines up with hybrid learning when we're looking at hybrid and remote students, how the standards align to what is being taught to see if they can transition to a different content area or transition to a different teacher. And as we get deeper and deeper into the year, and as we go through our grade spans, an example at the middle school and high school, the likelihood of this happening prior to a semester is nearly impossible with, we're running simultaneous school systems. So as we get further and further along, this becomes a little bit more difficult, but as we've learned from the last 5.5 months, there's circumstances out there that we can't predict. So that would be at an administrative discretion as a team looking at what it would look like to be able to transition through the content in which students are learning, or possibly if that means changing a teacher. And that leads us into some more logistics.
Quite as tall. So we're going to talk about the specific logistics, and then we'll break it out by grade span so you can see exactly which each grade span would look like in the fully remote plan. A couple overall logistics, and we even changed one of the numbers, even crunching the minutes up to late in the afternoon. You would have live sessions 4 days a week at minimum, with a minimum of 25 to 30 minutes per period or content block at all grade spans. And we'll talk by grade span what that looks like in just a little bit. We really wanted to ensure that if going fully remote, we continued those key live sessions to continue build relationships, clear content, student clarity, and teacher clarity in what's being learned and the pace and processing of that content. Attendance will be taken per period at the middle and high school, and then at the beginning of the day for elementary and early childhood, to make sure that we have them bright and early, right at the beginning of their typical day. They will, like Patrick said, will be following the schedule that they had in hybrid. And so that schedule that's laid out for them right now as an A-B student in the daily schedule, that they will still continue those same time blocks. And then grading will look exactly like it does here in hybrid. If they are piloting or trying standards-based grading, they will continue that, as well as at the elementary, we've been doing standards-based grading, and that will continue. We have to keep those structures in place because, like Patrick said as well, and I just want to reiterate, we hope to bring them and transition them back to hybrid as soon as it's safe for our students and staff to return, and it needs to be a flexible model. So the more logistics you can kind of keep the same and similar, the better that transition and that flexibility gives us. So specifically, what do the live sessions look like? Like Patrick said as well, they will happen on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. We'll talk about Wednesdays in the next 2 slides. They really will focus on having learning within the time period or content block that the students are attending right now. So if my first period is Algebra 1, that's what I would have as my first period as fully remote. For an elementary student, if we do an exploratory first, that's what I would have first in fully remote. If my second content block after my exploratory periods is to go back into my reading block, that's what I would be having next within my schedule. So the schedule that they're getting very accustomed to right now is the exact schedule we want to keep for them. It's a matter of when they log on during that content block, because we know it's unrealistic for many of our students, if not all, to log on for a whole 6.5, 7 hours within a given day. And so we're going to take those content blocks per the developmental level of the student and assign them when to log in within that block. So for instance, at the elementary, if we have an hour-long reading block, our A group students will log on for the first half hour of that block, and our B group students will log on daily for that second half hour. So we still at the elementary have smaller classes coming into Zoom, which developmentally we know takes a little bit more to have Zoom etiquette and management. And so we wanted to remain developmentally with the smaller class sizes for K-5. At the 6-12 level, like I said, if period 1 was Algebra 2, all Algebra 2 students, A and B, would log on at the beginning of that course together. They will be on for approximately the 22 to 25 minutes as a whole group, and then have some flexibility at the 612 level for the teachers to make the decision, I want to keep the whole group on the whole time today because I've got a meatier lesson that sets the foundation of some application work. Or after that mini lesson at the beginning, I now want to pair off and take a small group and work with them for the remaining 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the session. It's easier developmentally for a 612 student to manage a varied schedule than elementary, and that's why we've put a little bit more structure, K-5, into when they log in and when they log out versus 612. They'll all log on at the beginning, but may have some variance depending on the teacher's need and where they are in the delivery of content. So let's talk about our Wednesday opportunities. We do have some groups that are coming in still face-to-face in a small manner. Our self-contained classes, our life skills, our early childhood, those that are based on special education will be coming daily face-to-face because without all of our students here, when safe of course, if not, we would transition them to fully remote as well. If we can bring them on site though, we want to bring them on site. Which leads us to Wednesdays. We wanted to use Wednesdays as truly a day where we can personalize, differentiate for students. As Patrick said, there are many courses that students don't naturally have that equipment at home, or they don't have the right software at home, or they may need an intervention group that's more intensive when it's face-to-face, and that would be our process for Wednesdays. Teachers will either hold 2 hours of office hours and then virtual check-ins, one-on-one check-ins, small group meetings virtually, or we can ask the student to come in for a 2-hour and 40-minute block and run transportation that one day of the week. During that time, students, let's say for the graphics class at the high school, they have specific software, so they may be learning virtually some of the key strategies, vocabulary, but on Wednesdays, they need to come in and actually manipulate and produce using the software we have on site. Welding's another example, or RTI math. It might be something where we have the software and equipment here to do the specific intervention, and so small groups will be determined based on student need and kind of a hierarchy of, do you have equipment at home? If you don't have that equipment, do you have an intervention or enhancement need? If you have that, then can you come in for a 2-hour and 40-minute block? And again, we can run transportation so they could come in the AM block, the PM block, or if a student's schedule allows that they have many of those classes, they may be here for the full day Wednesday. We will have those same students come for 2 weeks in a row so that we don't have, am I supposed to go this day or not? They will have a decision. It'll be communicated 1 week before that Wednesday time starts, and then they'll come for the next 2 Wednesdays, and then the teacher will have a conversation with them of, I'd like for you to come for the next 2, or I think you can, have a virtual check-in on this day instead of coming in to use the equipment or to do the intervention. Again, there's kind of a hierarchy of the way we can personalize that. First, it really depends on what materials do they have or not have at home that we provide. And then special education programs, IEP, 504 needs, response to intervention needs. And at the kind of the decision making at the end, because we want to manage how many students are on site in any one given Wednesday, could be teacher discretion. If they have a certain literature circle or a guided reading group that they would want to meet face-to-face on Wednesdays for 2 weeks straight, the teacher may make that request of the students, and then we would look to see who else is coming onto that site and see if it will be feasible to have them come in. Uh-oh, my clicker went. So then let's talk specifically at the grade span. The first one is early childhood. Early childhood will remain a face-to-face class. It is held in one site, and with the ratio of teacher to students, we typically have enough space to fully socially distance, the ability to clean in between, and the ability to transport them daily. So early childhood, until we get to a point where we may need to shift to phase 2 and couldn't have anyone on site, would remain face-to-face Monday through Thursday as they are doing now. The next one is kindergarten through 5th grade. They would, like I explained just a little bit, have a schedule that they follow as they're following in hybrid with the exact courses at that exact time, but they would split the time of that content block. At the elementary, we're not locked to the 42-minute or 50-minute periods. We have longer blocks of time. So we have the ability to bring A's logged on first for 30 minutes, then B's for 30 minutes, and still have some transition time. The schedule will be posted 1 week prior, or at least 1 day prior, depending on how much notice we have. Week would be ideal. If we only have a day or two notice, we'll get that up right away. So the parents can see the schedule. Parents can also access now, what are you doing on a daily basis in hybrid, because that same schedule would be what they're using in fully remote. So you can start to, do you go to exploratories first? Do you do math first? Do you do reading? So you can start to understand those blocks as well. Their application time would be when the other group is on. So if I'm an A student and I log on for the first 30 minutes of reading, and then I log off so my B students can come on, application time for A students is occurring then. And so they really do have a full day of learning, but some of it is independent application, which is guided from the lesson live that they just had while the other students are on live. And then finally, we do need to set up a materials pickup. There are a variety of materials throughout the time of learning that we would need students to have access to. Right now, we are doing it for fully remote students by family choice and medical, where they can pick up a bag with materials that has their name on it in the foyer of the school. We would like to designate, when we have a larger population in fully remote, a specific day to have those pickups, so we don't have a large group of parents or students coming at one time. So teachers would plan ahead, and for instance, on Monday, kindergarten and first grade would pick up materials, but they wouldn't need to pick any up until the following Monday. Not to say that every week something would be there for them, so the teachers would be communicating, yes, there is something to pick up this Monday, but they may not have anything for 2 or 3 weeks, depending on where they are in their content and what materials are sent home. We are also establishing, starting right after Labor Day, for our current choice and medical students, as well as to apply to this plan, you can go online and hold a book through the libraries, and the librarians check it out to the student, mark the name, and leave it in the foyer for pickup already, and we would continue that process. So our libraries would continue to be up and running as well. Patrick is going to go over the other grade spans.
So the next two slides break part 6th through 8th grade, our middle school, and then as well as our high school. If you look at one, you're looking at the both. So the schedules would mirror for both grade spans what our current face-to-face schedule is. Again, we would advertise that, as Dr. Mum had said, with our community, hopefully at a minimum within 24 hours of knowing that we are going full remote. And then at the middle school and high school, again, our live learning instruction, our live sessions for those Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday are going to be is going to be the period long, and we're going to put the stipulation, or the plan has a stipulation, that there's going to be a minimum class time of 25 minutes each period where we're engaging in live instruction. And the reason we did that is that the state guidelines strongly encourage that students in a remote setting have access to 2.5 hours of synchronous live instruction each day. Beyond that, so that's our minimum of 25 minutes. Beyond that, teachers can utilize, again, as Dr. Mum had said, whole group if they want to continue with what they're instructing in that first part of the class. If they want to use breakout rooms through Zoom, if they want to use peer groupings or small groups to reteach or ask certain questions or check in on progress as students are going, they have a little bit more flexibility in that class period on how they want to structure the last half of that. And in that comes number 3, is that application time. They will balance the live instruction versus the application time within that given class period. And then at both levels for materials, if materials are needed, individual arrangements can be made. And that goes for library books. A lot of the materials we have are currently offered electronically, but if there is a need for other materials, they can make individual arrangements with buildings in order to have those. You may have seen a table in Harder if you came in through the front, but we have similar processes in place already. If there's a need to switch out a Chromebook, because our tech department is helping to repair one or another, again, there's a variety of different materials that might be needed. So the building levels are making their own arrangements and plans for those. And then going into expectations for students,
Excuse
again.
me one second, Patrick. Before we
Yes.
get too far along, I just wanted to see if there were board member questions for the first couple sections that you've heard.
So you were just talking about the minutes. For Wednesday minutes, because there isn't for most students, the live instruction, is that made up for on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or no? Is the access to office hours?
Yep, it can be. It's going to be if I'm not having small groups come in, then I do have posted office hours where I'm accessible to students. It could be, again, small groups through Zoom, so they may not physically be coming into the building, but there's a variety of other different activities that could be happening on those days.
Correct, but if students, it's recommended to get 12 and a half hours a week of live instruction, will some students not have that available to them?
There could be a circumstance where that happens. Yep, it's a little bit different than in the spring when they said you have to have these numbers. It's strongly encouraged, but it is a guideline from the state.
Yeah, I just couldn't do the math in my head real quick, because I think in middle school, you'll likely have that covered,
Yep,
but high school it might
high
be.
school is very similar. Yep.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
So if a teacher decides that they want to have small groups or something, parents still have the choice to say, I'm sorry, I'm not sending my child to the on-site, right? When we're fully,
Correct, but I think we would want to have, yes.
Yes.
Especially if we're a medical
yeah,
certification,
choice.
absolutely, yep.
Okay.
But then we would have those conversations if there was a need for that, a specialized schedule or equipment or software, we would want to problem solve with those on a case-by-case basis,
Okay.
how we can provide that. But yes, if I have a medical certification, I cannot be forced to come in on that Wednesday.
okay.
Well, we're offering a choice now, so will we not be offering that choice then? Right, you said medical certification only, does that mean, I think this is kind of what Teresa was saying, right? Like, say we go to phase 3 or go to phase 2, right? Or, well, it would be phase 3, right? So is that saying that maybe I no longer feel safe sending my kid anymore? Are we implementing choice, or is that not an option?
Choice to an extent in which that phase allows for it. So phase
Okay.
2 would look a lot different than even phase 3. In
Right.
phase 3, we would need to plan out what course it is, what are the numbers looking like with students and staff. So those would be a little bit different than this one that we're sharing tonight for phase 4.
Okay. Okay.
I get the logistics, but it seems a little intuitively backwards to me. It's getting worse, so we're going fully remote, but now you don't have the choice, as liberal a choice as you had before to keep your child
I
away
don't,
from everybody.
but I think we're still thinking it's phase 4 and not 2 or 3, so I think one scenario could be people out with colds, and just the absentee rate's high enough that it isn't a
Right.
COVID risk, it's just an absentee that you could take classes from home easier than being in person, but I guess if I say that, then I guess Wednesdays would still be out if you had a large absentee rate for a certain group of people, but it might not be a COVID. That's just one
Yeah.
possibility.
So, yeah, I guess this is where I'm getting hung up on is,
Yep.
this could still be a phase 4 situation, but something has triggered us that we're going remote, even though we're not back in the situation where we're in the spring, right? That's what I'm understanding, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so we're still with this wiggle room that we can mask up and social distance, and we can still be present with each other, but there's something that's triggering that we're gonna send kids home because it just seems more safer, or it's more logistical. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay.
The situation where it could arise, let's say we were at the high school and there was a spread through a given department, and we can't staff the math department. We may have to go to a fully remote circumstance. Within that, I might be able to have my automotive kids schedule where 1 or 2 of them are coming in to the automotive teacher. That is not near that. In that group or that department may not be positive tests. It could be one was symptomatic and others were around them. So there's a variety of different ways where it could work out, where it's not widespread across the entire student body or for all of the staff. So it could be housed in different pockets. Again, we would need to take a look at all of that and see, is it safe? Is it possible to do that? But really those Wednesday groups are very small groups where even now in classes of 15, 16, 17, we're talking through this Wednesday plan of possibly 2 or 3 kids and really scheduling that with purpose for what is safest for our kids.
Yeah, it seems like we're going to be kind of always back to the same line, right? That case-by-case situation. We have to look at what's going on and make these adjustments live and on the fly. It's tough because I still think we're kind of in the same position we were right before starting this year, right? Like, we were going to go hybrid only. That was our only choice, right? Then we were like, well, maybe we'll do hybrid and we'll do face-to-face. And then we actually dropped the face-to-face completely and we went to online instead, right? Like, it just seems like best laid plans, right? We're going to have to, yeah.
For sure.
Sure.
Sorry, that was
So
more of
maybe
a comment than a question.
is your maybe question too, if we are in phase 2, would Wednesdays be a typical day?
Yeah, well,
Is that ever a
sounds like the
possibility?
phases are gonna
Phase 2,
dictate
we
that-
would not be able to bring anybody on site. Yep.
Yeah, that's all.
So
in the
maybe
phase-
there is that already kind of
Right.
built in.
And then if phase 3 is the same phase 3 of Restore Illinois, where it was groups of 10 or fewer,
Right.
then we would follow those guidelines. But we just don't know if Restore Illinois is going to remain the same. So if we go back to phase 3,
Oh, I didn't even
maybe
consider
the numbers are different. If we go to phase 2, maybe the numbers are different. But whatever those guidelines are, we would make sure we follow those guidelines because they could be different from the spring.
Good. Yeah, that's a good point. I wasn't even considering that. I'm still operating that phase 3 is phase 3's definition, but it could totally change.
Could be
Right?
different.
IDPH could come up with something totally different, you know? Thanks for being flexible, guys.
Expectations for students. Again, as we reflected on the spring, as we built these plans, as we vetted those 19 different modules and structures, we wanted to make sure that our students continue to have access to the highest level of education and instruction as possible. So we built this plan taking a lot of feedback from the community. One of the biggest things we heard is that we need everything located in one centralized location. So students are going to check Canvas daily for activities and learning activities from their teacher. And we do have some teachers that use different websites. Some of our curriculum materials are linked electronically. And if that is the case, we're asking that teachers house all of that in one spot. So parents from home, even if I have a student that's in the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school, I'm going to one location to find all of those pieces. We are going to make sure that there's a difference with this, again, compared to the spring. When we were with the spring, we were limited in new standards that we can introduce for, I think, about the first 3 or 4 weeks. We were limited in our ability to grade and issue new grades on new learning, and those have been removed in this phase. Not to say that in a phase 2 those might come back, so I think that's why that piece isn't as fully built out yet, because it would probably come with some more mandates from the state. But operating in this phase, we have the ability to instruct new materials and new standards. We have the ability to grade. We have the ability to provide critical and constructive feedback and ask that students are resubmitting, submitting and resubmitting work. We're making sure that students are engaged throughout the learning process, throughout the Zoom meeting. We've offered some professional development tips to our staff on how to build those relationships, on how to manage Zoom, manage mute buttons, the expectation that when a student comes on, I can see them through their video. So we've set those things in place, and a lot of our remote teachers now are doing those things, but reiterating that with our students of our expectation is going to be that you are dedicated to an entire day, full day worth of learning in the structure in which we're operating. So, and then the last piece on there, again, is being prepared to come in on a Wednesday, looking at where you're at, identifying a need for some of that personalized instruction on a Wednesday, knowing you need to sign up and making sure that you're holding yourself accountable to what those Wednesday expectations are. But definitely compared to the spring, a much more rigorous set of expectations for our students. It's a longer time frame in which they're engaged. And we've implemented some things to start the year already in a week and a half where students are becoming more and more used to living in a Zoom world and communicating through a screen and what those expectations look like. And we would just build on those for the full student body being home.
Some expectations for teachers is that they would be on site during a Phase 4 fully remote. They will meet students electronically through Zoom in their classrooms. If they have a shared classroom or office, we could find other classrooms that they have the availability to be the only person in that classroom, unless they are currently medically exempted. All of our current medical exemptions for teachers as well as students would stay in place, and the family choice will remain on their current schedule until the end of the trimester, and then they may opt to continue to do that for the remaining portion of the semesters or trimesters. A couple other expectations for teachers is that they will have Zoom meetings daily. In Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we kind of discussed that it would go by the schedule and the content block. On Wednesdays, they will still be engaged and host meetings with students up to 5 hours. As Patrick said, that could be through office hours and kind of open Zoom where you can pop in, ask a question, and pop out. Or it might be, I'm going to designate these 5 students to come to a Zoom meeting for a small guided reading group, for instance, and I'll share that specific time. But those Wednesdays are 5 hours of student contact time, but that contact might vary depending where I am in my content, as well as where the students are in their learning progression. They will participate in fully remote learning planning days prior to the start of this. We're looking at 1 or 2 days, depending on where we are in the course of the content in the school year when this plan needs to begin. And so they will participate in those planning days prior to make sure everything's in place, schedule-wise, Zoom link-wise, Canvas updates and posts, so that we're ready to go on that very first day. Teachers will also provide weekly feedback on instruction. Like Patrick shared, this isn't like Phase 2 in the spring where we had a no harm clause. Everyone does need to earn that content grade, and so that feedback is essential in a very timely manner. And so that immediate feedback within the week that they are doing the assignments is essential. Some expectations for families. We would always encourage that they have a place set up for learning at home, a quiet place, or depending on your students' learning needs, what distractions or what non-distractions do they need in that space. Make sure that they communicate with the school if there's some Wi-Fi or internet connectivity issues, and we can problem solve with the families. We want to make sure that they encourage their students or even join in with their student to check into Canvas daily, as well as their emails in case anything has changed. We do emails from 3rd grade and up, and so students can start to access them at that time. We really do continue to ask parents to refrain from participating in the lesson and let the learning process happen for the student. I know it's so tempting when you're home to jump in and say, no, this is the answer, but we really want to encourage parents to be an observer of that learning and not maybe a participant of the learning, and then help establish those key routines. This is still a full day of learning. You need to get your sleep, you need to have a nice lunch, you need to have that routine set up in your home that we try to set up just as much at school so that they can continue to have a positive learning experience. And then finally, before we go to next steps, a couple of things of how will we know when to transition back from fully remote or transition to fully remote from a hybrid model. Of course, we always check the directives from the state, whether it comes from ISBE, the governor, any of those guidances. It would help us determine what phase we're in and why we're in that phase and what flexibility we have in the phase. As Patrick said, we continue to monitor staff illnesses, medical exemption leaves, or FMLA leaves. On any given year, you have all of those and you want to monitor, but if it happens to pool in one area and we're unable to staff a department, a grade level, or a school, that would shift the decision to fully remote. And then we also look at our regional numbers, as we have been doing, what's happening in Kane County, as well as Region 8, and then our state numbers and state phases as well.
And lastly, before we look or open up for any further questions, is kind of taking a look at what our next steps are going to be. So right now, we're in step one. We have crafted this plan. We've shared it with KEA leadership. We've shared it with our administrative team. We are seeking your feedback or questions to clarify any aspects of this, to fine tune that plan, to be able to share with all of our Canelan employees. While we are doing that, we have provided and we're encouraging, or as the time approaches and we know that we need to plan a remote planning day, what is called a distant learning or remote learning module. So that walks through how, as a remote teacher, I might set up my learning space, all the way through what does engagement look like in instructing via live conferencing or via Zoom. So there's some modules in there, some reflective pieces, some tools to help build some of the logistics, and asks really, really good questions. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on staff that have completed that thus far. But if all of our staff are going to that distance learning, we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to kind of re-up on that and take a look at that remote learning PD one more time. Again, looking at that Wednesday and the intricacies of what that day looks like, we are going to continue to plan what the logistics of those small groups would look like. From transportation to what qualifies a student to come, when does that suggestion come, and then as well as what am I doing if I don't have a small group for those 2 weeks, what does my Wednesday look like? And then lastly, that key for step 4 is drafting the communication timeline and the communication plans for our community. Our aim, our goal is to have that drafted and shared out with our community by September 15th. So those are the next steps that we're looking at and what we'll be working on the coming days with a variety of, again, from cabinet to our administrative team and just fine-tuning this plan based on the feedback that we receive. As always, I think something that we are incredibly proud of, something that Dr. Layden led us from day one, is that our students have been our focus in doing anything we can and everything we can to make sure that they are safely being instructed by our teachers. And that includes hybrid models, that includes choice models, that includes, I think, 17 plans that didn't cut it, but thoroughly vetting that through the lens of what is best for our students. And as we talk with other districts around the county, I think Canelan's in a pretty unique position where we can provide those different models and truly personalize the learning experience for all of our families and all of our families' needs.
One point to clarify, because I don't know if we hit it well enough as I reflect standing here, is that this plan really applies to students that are in a hybrid model that would go fully remote. Those that are on family choice currently remain on family choice even if this fully remote plan is enacted. They stay until the semester or trimester. And then those that are on medical exemption stay in the medical exempted fully remote course until their medical exemption is cleared for return. There may be a case-by-case, like Patrick did mention in one of the slides, where we would look if there was a need to transition a student from a fully remote current class to a different fully remote class. But we have to keep that designation of family choice and medical exemption in case we go back to hybrid 2 weeks later. We don't want to create a situation where a student is fully remote by choice now. They shift to a classroom teacher for fully remote. 2 weeks later, they have to shift back. And that's just not a good learning practice for students. So it really applies to those that are in hybrid going to fully remote because of the flexibility of implementation.
So those people that are on choice would not have to send their kids
Correct.
and would not at all on Wednesdays?
No.
Okay.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that clarification. Better, right? Yeah, because when we saw the charts with the transitions and things, it
Yes.
sounded like we were going to transition everyone to one.
Nope, just the hybrid students.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So you'd said you were planning on providing maybe a refresher on the PD for teachers. Do you have times or days kind of like blocked out what you're going to do to allow for that, or is that still kind of in the works?
I think we have a couple options. Obviously, the remote planning days would be pieces of that day where, yes, planning occurs, but we would want to offer that distance learning module as well as a social, emotional, and Zoom module that has been created. But we also have the ability now to be doing things during collaboration time in the morning at elementary, or curriculum time at the middle school, or the KLC time at the high school, where we can infuse pieces of that. And we've been working with instructional coaches to really infuse that PD along the way and not wait just for that remote planning day. Our next SIP day isn't until November, and hopefully we'll still be in hybrid at that time, and we'll continue to plan tons of sessions on those days in November.
And we've had 2 remote planning days on August 13th and 14th, and that has been shared with all of our staff. So at any time they have access to it, whether they want to engage the first time or as a refresher. So that was shared out with everybody, as well as some PD with some Zoom, where you could kind of choose your technical abilities through those meetings and see how you could enhance your lessons. So those have been shared and provided. It's just a matter of, if I'm not currently doing that, I might need to reaccess them and refresh myself as we get ready to go. But we would likely need to build in at least one of those remote planning days if we know that as a district we're doing that.
Sure.
And we continue to have Canvas sessions provided by our one-on-one learning coach. Her schedule has never been busier because of the amount of Canvas grade level PD meetings, one-on-one. And so we are continuing to do Canvas embedded every day, honestly. I can't get a meeting with her right now.
What supports are we planning for parents, right? So a lot of our parents right now are on hybrid, right? So moving fully online is going to be a big transition for their families. What are you thinking right now for parental support?
Right now, we're putting together with instructional coaches as well as some other staff the content area videos, how to support your students in certain content areas, not training them to be the teacher, but how can I be the learning support advocate in different contents. And then our one-on-one learning coach has also put together Zoom etiquette, Canvas tutorials, how to pair, how to observe in Canvas, and we'll continue to promote those. Am I missing anything?
No, just a handful of community members or parents that have reached out via email with very specific questions. Unfortunately, last week across the country and I think across the world, Zoom had some technical glitches.
Right.
We got that back up and running by the afternoon, but there's been a handful that have reached out with some specifics, and then we problem solve as a team on how to address those as they arise.
This is probably an unfair question, but I mean, I can't imagine that you know the answer, but what percentage of middle school and high school teachers right now have at least one period that's remote? Do you know? Like a 20%, 50%?
It's probably, I'd want to say probably 20 without looking at
That would have been my
master schedule.
guess with no basis whatsoever. But I wonder how many are already experiencing it, more than maybe we thought when we started the summer. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm just trying to think about that transition for the teachers. It's not really the parents, but.
And we have a very collaborative staff, so we do have a handful of teachers that live that on a day-to-day basis. So they've been doing that for a week and a half. And again, hopefully we never get to this. If we do, hopefully it's not for another few months. And a lot of those things are worked out and collaboratively they can, because even our remote teachers that are working off-site have the ability to zoom into those grade level meetings or those KLC meetings and share planning and share thoughts. So if the time comes, I'm sure we'll have those that can share out, here's went well, here's what you need to do day 1 and day 2. So I think we've received pretty positive feedback from parents on both ends, of both our hybrid learners and those that are fully remote, that it is, compared to the spring and everything that they've expected for a rigorous environment to start the year, they've been pretty pleased with it.
Yeah, I was going to wait to the next session, but I'll tell you from my personal experience, it's been fantastic, right? So, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but my child is parent choice online, and his teacher is doing phenomenal work with those kids. So, the curriculum's strong, the delivery's strong. I'm seeing really positive stuff. And I've heard similar things from our neighbors. So, Yeah, you guys are doing awesome work on this, so I only suspect that you'll continue to carry that on, so that's good.
Any other?
Thank you.
Todd, at the last meeting, we talked about being prepared for this, if you will. And so, and there was also the talk about approval from the state as to what's relevant or what they want to see and such. Is this prepared? Do we have guidelines for that, or do we prepare it and then we present it? Or are we even going to go there?
Yeah, the guidelines that the state has given us are part of the same guidance that districts are already using that are remote. So as we built this follows the guidelines, the current guidelines for phase 4 at-home learning. So are you asking me about the e-learning
So
plan?
I'm talking about if we go fully remote. We talked about if we go fully remote, what happens? I know I specifically mentioned because I reiterated what you said at the ROEs.
Yep.
You know, blessing what we're doing presently, and then if we went to the full blow, if you will, whether that was going to be a question of do we take it to is it approved where grading will be grading as opposed to everybody stops grading type of thing.
Yeah, if right now to start the school year we had to have our hybrid model and remote model approved through the King County Health Department and the ROE, so both of those were. So as we get ready to finalize this based on this feedback and meeting with administrators again, I'll send that over to the county superintendent, Pat Del Santo, and do the same thing and then have her approve that for the remote plan. So it'll follow the same guidelines and the same steps that we followed to start the school year.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Anything else? No, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So as Aaron said, we'll move on to J2, report on the opening of school.
Yes, typically during this report, we share some of the highlights that we had to start the school year. So typically I share a series of those highlights. So I have some from technology, curriculum, buildings and grounds. So I'll just go through some of those. There's some little data in there for those of you that like data or those that want to hear about our students. We have a little bit of everything. The first thing I'd like to share, a note of appreciation to our entire staff, administration, certified staff, support staff, office staff, and all of our departments and department heads. This is truly a year and a start unlike any other, and without all of us working together, we could not have done it. And it was a number of and done it so successfully, and a number of iterations. And so as we work through those, it is great to work with this team and be part of this team. So I am proud of them and proud of our work. We did start our year, as you know, on the AB hybrid and remote learning model. And our official data after our surveys and all of the information is in and our students are placed, we do have 82% of our students who are in the AB hybrid on-site model at 3,285. And we do have 18% at 724 that are part of the family and or choice medical option. And this year we do a number that I don't usually chart very closely, but due to the fact that we know there's some homeschool and maybe more students selecting private schools, we do have 191 students this year that selected homeschool or private school, and that number is typically about half of that, about 80, 85, between 70 and 80. So that number has doubled, a little more than doubled to 191. So that is a number that we'll continue to monitor as we start next school year and go into second semester to see if those shift at all.
Do you have grade level information on that? Like, is it more elementary kids that people chose to homeschool, or is it
We do
spread out?
We do have that information, and it is more elementary than typical. I think the elementary 17, 18, 19 a year, and I think this year it was almost 85.
Oh, wow.
So that was the biggest gap, and I think middle school and high school stayed pretty similar to what they typically have.
Okay, thank you.
Have we
Sorry.
talked to those parents and get a sense of what their decision making was?
Not that I know of.
Okay, I didn't think so. I just thought
Yeah.
you'd ask me.
Buildings and grounds with Mr. Payton and Dr. Fuchs looked awesome this year to start the school year. Did a great job having the outsides ready to go and the insides. If you'll recall, the insides are typically similar from year to year, but this year with social distancing, we had to move more tables and desks, and where do we put them, and how do we repurpose them, and where do we repurpose them. So it's I don't know, a DIY nightmare to figure out where we're going to put them and we're going to keep those. But they did a great job, so thank you. And also, along the same lines, all of the PPE that has been purchased and collected and used, we are very thankful that we are on site and able to use it for as long as we are on site. From the face masks, the face shields, disposable gloves, we have a hand sanitizer station in every one of our classrooms. So very few stones unturned, and we do have a shared doc that we have with our staff. As they see and hear things, they're filling out that doc and document, and Dr. Fuchs and Dr. Adkins are looking at that regularly to see what needs are out there, to see how we can continue to support our our teachers and our staff to make sure that they're in an environment that is safe and clean for them also. From the HR side, we've hired over 40 new staff, and that number is usually in the 20s, and if you recall, usually it's done closer right after the March staffing meeting, but this year with the change to the hybrid model, it went up right to the very last day, if not right after the last day, to make sure that we had all of the staff done. So HR department did a great job. The ad team, as they're interviewing, and then the teachers, very important for the teachers to welcome in new people onto their teams or their departments. So that was a good team level also. And then a plug for HR. We are still looking for a couple recess monitors and lunchroom supervisors. So if you know anybody, or if you're watching at home and you're interested in working a couple hours a day, contact our district office and Dr. Adkins. He'd be happy to give you some directions. We had, as Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh talked about, staff training. We have had over 100 staff members that attended the Canvas training, and fortunately with them they become experts, and then they can share with their colleagues and department members. And we also had over 210 staff members attend both virtual and face-to-face training sessions on Canvas, content seminars, and de-escalation plans through special education. We have had this year, knowing coming from the spring that we would typically have some sort of a remote session at this point this year. We did purchase additional hotspots that we couldn't get in the spring, because if you recall, back in the spring when hotspots were available, they went to first responders, hospitals, and emergency personnel, so we couldn't get any in the spring. So Dr. Fuchs and Mr. Wolf forward planned, and now we have those on site, and we are utilizing those with families that are in need right now. Other thing that we kicked off the year, starting a little bit later, we utilized a couple remote learning planning days to start the year, and so as a result, at the subsequent 2 board meetings, we've approved new calendars for the school year, and our last day is now going to be a week later into May 24th, so it's pushed back 4 days from when we initially approved the calendar. So if you're looking for the calendar, there are updates on that, and it is new. Last couple things, and also with the election day being a holiday, that was the 4th day that we moved back, which is in November. Then the last thing, or last 2 things, as part of our state mandated GCN modules, Global Compliance Network, there's a series that we have to watch every year and participate in to stay compliant. And this year, GCN did create 3 new COVID-19 modules, so all of our staff members watch those too. So staff and teachers watch those just to stay up to date on those 3 modules. They were all 8 to 10 minutes long or so, so it just gave a lot of extra how to wear PPE properly, how to sanitize, how to wash hands, and so our staff is an expert in those areas for a number of reasons. And also, just wanted to share, I think we talked a little bit about this at Salutes at the last meeting, our new teachers, because we do have so many of them, and new staff members. Dr. Adkins is going to start to work with them to organize a little bit of a new teacher welcome over the next 4 or 5 board meetings with 8 to 10 or so to make sure we can stay socially distant. They'll have a nice spot out there. If Dr. Adkins can read their name, they can stand and wave. Typically, it would have been a big reception with some cake, but maybe next year, but for this year, at least you can put a name with a face and get to meet them, and that way they can come to a board meeting and see what happens at a board meeting. So those are a lot of our highlights to start the school year. There are many more, but those are the ones that wanted to make sure to bring to your attention because they're representative of all the good work across all of our departments. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Todd,
Yes.
what were some of your obstacles? What are the areas that didn't go so well that we could have done better, I guess, for the next time or as we continue?
The areas that didn't go, so I don't want to highlight a lot of those because that's
The top ones.
yeah, no, a couple of things. I think there have been, as I think Patrick and Sarah shared, a Zoom last week, and then I think there was a Canvas glitch either today or Friday. So there have been a few tech pieces because with the remote piece, our tech department is challenged in a way that they've never been challenged before, both with staffing, with the number of staff that we have, and also with their planning and being able to follow up with students. I think another area was just hiring in general. I think HR, I think Dr. Atkins would just share the stressor of whenever we talked as a team, he was like, yes, we can do this, yes, we can do this. But I'm sure he walked out going, I'm not sure I can find all of those people. but fortunately, over the last 2 weeks, we have the vast number of positions filled other than the couple that I shared. So those are a couple of the challenges, and I think a couple of challenges are just ongoing as we experience day-to-day activities and try to address those.
Sound like some of those were out of your control, too.
Some of them are, yes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sure at this point it's just anecdotal, but what are you hearing about the fully remote students? I just don't hear about their experiences much, so I was just curious about their return to school.
I know that a couple, I've heard from 3 or 4, and the 3 or 4, the primary topic or the primary experience that they've had so far is the appreciation that it's more like a regular school day. It's more regular checking in. There are more live classes. It looks more like what a school could look like remotely as opposed to what the spring was. So I think there's been a great deal of appreciation for the work that our teachers did and Patrick and Sarah and Laura over the summer to get those that would be teaching remote ready to teach remote. So I think that's the biggest aha or the primary feedback that we've received is the appreciation that it looks more like a regular school day, and that's part of why and how we modeled this full remote plan to follow that based on some of that feedback too. So thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to J3, approval of board resolution on Black Lives and racial equality.
For that one, if you recall, as noted in the memo, we have, at June 29th, it was a board topic for future agenda and the idea to have a discussion on the possibility of a board resolution on these topics. And as a result, the board had some discussion that night and recommended and requested that we administratively bring back a resolution for the board's consideration tonight. And as you can see in the board packet on the back page of the memo, the resolution is created and brought back following our policies as a footnote in there also. And then also the other piece, a lot of this is based from the State Board of Education. I did look at theirs as a model and as a template. It's not exactly the same because that's governing a whole state where we're just governing a smaller piece of that. So a couple of the ideas and thoughts we based on that. And then the other piece, if you'll recall, I think I shared with you that over the summer, we had a number of students reach out to their trusted teachers and ask if they could talk a little bit and talked a little bit about the topic, and then ended up meeting with a number of teachers and a couple administrators and a couple community members 2 or 3 times just to talk through it, see what their concerns, what their questions are. And so I think based on some of those, based on our board policy that we already have, and based on best practice, this is a recommended resolution to bring back to our board.
Great, any comments? That's good.
I think we're getting too close to politically putting stuff into the school stuff, and I totally do not agree with this. If I look at diversity itself, supporting diversity out of it, which, I mean, we can talk about that. Not that I don't believe in it, because I think it should be happening to begin with. Because the next thing I can ask you is, does brown lives matter? And we can keep on going. So I think we should focus on the diversity aspect of it and support what we're supposed to be doing and move forward with that. Because one of the things that, if I recall, the meeting was to get things out of it that would bring about classes to attend, educate those that are at the front lines, if you will, to make the experience better at the education level. So I'm more about just leaving it at the diversity. I can't breathe with this thing. At the diversity level, than to start putting labels on things.
Any other comments?
So although I respect what you're saying, Pedro, I totally do. I think if you read through this, it doesn't really single out any one group. It's pretty good at saying students of color, right? Not saying just black students, right? So it is doing a pretty good job, I think, of celebrating those differences. And I think at this time we need to we have a responsibility to say something for our students of color that might be feeling the pressures of the world in a new way, because we have the voice to do so. But like I said, I'm not saying I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think we should celebrate diversity. I'm saying that I think this does address that, though. That's my opinion.
And that's exactly, if I take that first part, the title, if you will, out, that's what I saw. I saw diversity. I read it.
I think, and I understand what you're saying, I do, but I think what's happening here is that this is, when it says our commitment to Black lives and racial equality, it's because society has triggered this moment, right? Had it been a Brown Lives Matter movement or whatever Lives Matter movement, we would be writing a policy for that then, right? So right now, this is the trigger, so we're
And that's
using
exactly what I said. Where does it stop?
I don't know if it should. But maybe we should just keep doing it every time a new movement.
I would add that maybe we missed an opportunity or two. You know what? Maybe we missed when, immigration was the question. Maybe we didn't step up. And I would hope that we would continue to do it, but it is in response to, the societal, awakening to the fact that there's systemic changes. And I think as a public entity, public schools have been part of that systemic racism. And I think we have to, by resolving to work against that, to make things better, it makes things better for everyone. But I do think we could, we can continue to monitor things and certainly get behind other groups.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would think, this is a new template for moving forward, right? Here's an opportunity, we're seizing an opportunity, and then as new things arise, we can continue to add our voice out there to continue to protect and speak for our students who are young people and don't necessarily have that voice. So the next one might be, Brown Lives or LGBTQ or whatever it is. It might just continue to add to this,
Any other discussion? All right, we'll move to a vote.
So
Oh, go ahead.
don't we read it?
I think I have it.
I think someone reads the whole thing.
I think I found it. All right. This is long, Teresa.
I know, I'm sorry.
Thanks for nominating me. No. Resolution affirming Canelan High School District's commitment to Black lives and racial equality. Whereas the Canelan Board of Education is committed to ensuring that Canelan schools provide safe and welcoming spaces where all students are able to focus on their education, secure in the knowledge that their safety and emotional well-being will be supported regardless of race or ethnicity. Whereas the Canelan Board of Education recognizes that historical and ongoing systems of inequity exist. Whereas the Canelan Board of Education desires that Canelan School District systematically addresses concerns to ensure a school system that fosters awareness and equity for students of color, as well as provides educational opportunities to learn inclusive practices, Board Policies 610, 672, and 710. Whereas the Canelan Board of Education appreciates the necessary and important work that our school district is doing to advance racial equality, but is aware that we can, as a district, do more. Therefore, be it resolved that the Canelan Board of Education supports our committed district leaders, teachers, staff, and students who are dedicated to work for a lasting change that honors human dignity of all Canelan community members, as well as all residents of the state of Illinois, reaffirms that all district policies and practices promote equity and equality for all Canelan students, both in and out of the classroom, recognizing our position of authority will check and question our biases, beliefs, and actions to ensure racial equality becomes permanent in Canelan Community Unit School District 302, encourages hiring and staffing practices to work towards creating and maintaining a district staff that is representative of the Canelan student body. So I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the board resolution on Black Lives and Racial Equality as presented.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sorry. Sure.
Oh, no, it's okay. Is there something out of here that we can measure? And if so, how?
I think that's, I mean, you can speak to this too, Dr. Layden, but I would imagine that that's something that comes from this. I don't know if our resolutions are always measurable, but I hear what you're saying, that there should be an action that supports the resolution.
I mean, we talked about potential, as I said earlier, about educational pieces, things that come to obviously let it blossom, if you will. And that's what was talked about, so that's why the question.
What I could foresee, I think we have, I'm going to meet with the rest of the administrative team, and I think September 30th, 2 board meetings from now, we'll be having our bullying presentation that a couple, and social emotional wellness presentation that some board members have asked for. So the other thing we could do too is on this, as we get started with that work, we can also consider times to bring back this topic of what we're doing, how we're doing, and what we're doing, and then determine what pieces of that should be measurable for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and a roll call.
Mr. Rivas.
Abstain.
Mrs. Sparber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Motion carries 401, and we will move on to superintendent reports.
Yes, I have just a few tonight. Thank you. The first thing, next week, we do have our Hall of Fame meeting that will be conducted via Zoom. Well, I think one of the things that I shared with our board is that during this time, based on the cleaning cycles, based on custodial work, we're going to try to minimize to the greatest extent possible any of our on-site meetings that we can do via Zoom instead. So for the safety of our families to come into the building, and also for the cleanliness, and that way our custodial staff doesn't have to go back over and re-clean things after we convene. So you'll see probably more meetings district-wide via Zoom, Hall of Fame being one of our first ones on the 9th, and then FPC will also be a Zoom meeting that will be on the September 15th, and I'll share more of this information later. And then September 17th, the foundation also meets this week too. I forgot, sorry. The foundation meets Wednesday night to discuss foundation events, with one of the big ones being the golf outing, and we'll have to have some conversation about the golf outing. The numbers are down this year as to past years, which probably not a complete surprise. So then we'll have that meeting to determine whether or not we'll still have that, maybe some other foundation work. And then the other piece was CAC was to meet last week, but in lieu of the meeting, just with the timeliness and putting it together and not wanting to host big groups on site, I did do a survey with CAC, so I am getting some responses back. And as you talk about President Sparber, how the beginning of the school year is going, I'm sure we'll get some good feedback from our CAC members, because what we were looking for was whether they were hybrid or remote, how did their beginning of the year go, what are areas to highlight, showcase, and what are some areas we can continue to work on. So that's another feedback piece that we can utilize. So those are my 4 board updates.
Dr. Fuchs?
I don't have any tonight, thank you.
Great. All right, so I think we're on topics for future agendas. None? Move on to public comment. None? Okay, we do have closed session tonight, and we do expect action as a result of closed session. That means once closed session has concluded, we will come back to open session again, and we will finish our meeting here at the end. So we're going into closed session for Illinois Code 122C1. Is there a motion to go into closed session for that reason?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Barber,
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Convene.
All right, so we will be back in session at 8:57 PM. All right, so I will make a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education authorize the issuance of the notice to remedy to Miss Lori Schroka. Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
And Mrs. Pavlik.
Mo-
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?